Triumph's Scrambler 400X has been an excellent seller since it was introduced a year or two back. It's a really good looking bike at a decent price, with good performance and character, and also a nice spacious, roomy riding position. So this year, well, it looks like Triumph decided to double down on its success with a new version, the Scrambler 400XC. I guess the idea with this one is to make something that looks a bit more off-roady, and so we've been invited to the Triumph Adventure Experience in Wales to take it out for the day and see if it's any good. So is this new bike a genuinely off-road capable machine, or is it more of a case of style over substance? Well, stick with us for a bit of riding both on-road and off, where I'll tell you all the good and bad along the way to find out. So first up, a bit of road riding to get from the Adventure Centre to their off-road playground, but also a good chance to reacquaint myself with one of the Triumph 400's key strengths.
Straight away, hopping back on this bike. I've ridden the 400X before and the Speed 400. One of the best things about it is the 400cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine, which is dubbed the TR series. These bikes, you may well know, are made out in India on Triumph's behalf by Bajaj, who also make some of the small capacity KTMs. And so it would have been quite easy, I suppose, for them to end up with an engine that feels a little bit generic because it's, licensed out, the production. And I believe Bajaj, having a lot of experience making this sort of capacity of bike, probably had a decent hand in the conception of it and the design of it. What I will say though is they have kept it feeling like a Triumph. It feels a little bit, Bonneville-esque. It's not a twin cylinder, but it has some of the same characteristics, like the nice sound to it. It's got a bit of depth in terms of the exhaust note. It's not particularly loud, but it's got a bit of bassiness. But also the delivery of power. It's got a nice, clean throttle map. I feel like it's very controlled. And also a rich mid-range to it, which is, I think, one of the good things about the Bonnies as well. So look, around, I think it's 39 horsepower peak. They could have made it more powerful because with the A2 segment, you can go up to 47. But perhaps that would have been at the sacrifice of a little bit of that usable low end and mid-range. And so I think it was probably the right call to focus on that. There are other bikes, for example, in this sort of category, the KTMs, for example, that really are much happier to rev and do make closer to that maximum legal peak power figure, but they don't have the guts at the bottom. And so, yeah, for me, I think this is preferable for this style of retro aesthetic bike where it's not coherent, perhaps, with the riding style to be constantly wringing its neck. Honestly, it's a lovely engine, and I'm very interested to see whether that torquiness and the really pleasant throttle map translates to being a really good thing off-road, which I'm very much hoping it will do.
So on to Triumph's off-road arena, where we can have a bit of a play with these bikes and find out if they can really scramble. But before that, a quick word on the gear I'm wearing today.
Now you're probably wondering why I didn't shoot this section before the bikes and my gear got all dirty, and it's a great question and one that I'm also wondering the answer to. But anyway, before we get onto the riding here at the Off-Road Centre, a massive thanks to Louis Moto for supporting the channel and making free-to-view videos like this one possible. Louis Moto is a huge European online retailer of parts, clothing and accessories, but also they do ship to the UK and they offer fast shipping and free returns. And not only do they stock a huge range of the biggest brands in motorcycling, but also they've got a great selection of their own brand stuff, which I think offers exceptional value for money. Now with a retro bike like this, I'd fully recommend checking out their Detlev Louis line, like for example the leather jacket that I'm wearing today and also the gloves that I've paired it with. Both of them beautifully designed, really nicely
nicely made. And not only do they match this style of bike, but they also do pack lots of modern day protection, like the elbows, the shoulders, and also it's got a pocket for a back protector, which is a non-negotiable to come on a day like this. So look, once again, a massive thanks to Louis Moto for their support. And with that, let's have a look at what makes this XC version different to the X. There is a little bit of foliage to remove here, but the main difference between the X and the XC is, of course, the wheels. Other than that, you know, there's not really much to differentiate them. Same engine, same frame, same suspension, same 150mm of travel front and rear, same geometry, same riding position, and so really it is, I think, more of a styling package than anything. Still, you know, the 19-inch front, the 17 at the rear give you a little bit of off-road bias, and these spoke rims, which are tubeless by the way because they lace to the edges, perhaps will offer a little bit of extra strength versus the cast wheels on the standard 400X. And so if you are off-road riding them, still, you know, this is probably the one to go for. All right, so a little bit of a warm-up on the arena here, just to get used to the bike and to the surface today. And yeah, we've just been through the settings actually, and there is an off-road mode which is good. So it switches off TC and ABS, and so it's a nice quick way to do that without having to go through all the individual settings. I will say straight away, the standing up position on this bike is perhaps a little better than I was expecting. It feels quite nice. Perhaps not quite so conducive to stood up riding as a Tiger 900 or something like that. But the bars are high enough, the pegs are in the right place, and so it does actually feel quite natural. If you are new to off-roading though, one of the perhaps slightly intimidating things if you come here is the sort of stature of the Tigers, the Tiger 900s. But with this bike, it's 835mm in the seat, and so that does give you something that still means you can get your feet down quickly if you need to and paddle yourself along. Now, I did say earlier that, you know, most of the changes to this bike are superficial versus the Scrambler 400X, but I will say I do think overall it does make for a slightly better looking bike. The handguards, the high front mud guard, the fly screen, the headlight guard, the engine bars, the sump guard are all part of this package, and of course it does make it look a little more purposeful and a little more aggressive. Massively helped though by these Michelin Anarchy Wilds. On top of that, this yellow paint job as well is specific to the XC, and I do think it looks really quite punchy, which is nice to see, and also suits this kind of scrambler genre of bike. And the only real downside, aside from the additional cost of course of, you know, this bike with the extra spec, is a little bit of extra weight. I believe it's around 7 kilograms more, so, you know, not a humongous difference. But of course, if you're a newer rider or maybe a little less confident, then perhaps the slightly lighter bike might be appealing. But I will say, generally, from the riding we've done today, I haven't really had any moments where I've thought, you know, crikey, this is a heavy bike. Right, onto the trails now. And there's plenty in this complex for the Adventure Centre. Lots of loops, lots of interesting stuff, so let's see how the bike does. I think you've got to remember though, this is ultimately predominantly a street bike, so there's 150mm of travel, there's not bags of ground clearance, and the suspension response is going to be set up for on tarmac. Plus you've got that, you know, 19-inch front wheel, which isn't going to cut in quite the same as like the big 21-inch front on a Scrambler 1200. So I don't think they're going to be taking us on the most hardcore trails today, but so far it is proving to be very good fun. I mean, realistically as well, what sort of riding are people going to do on this bike? Probably a bit of dabbling and this sort of stuff, fire roads, fairly wide trails like this, and look, it'll definitely do it. All they've done to these bikes today is put some decent off-road rubber on them, which of course is a necessity, but otherwise they're stock. Now this is Matt, who works here. Do you run it? Would you say you run the Adventure Centre?
I do, I run it, yeah, and I've done for the last 8-9 years. So.
Well, there you go, so the man with the experience. I guess I wanted to know about the new bikes. It's a really good introduction, isn't it, to riding off-road, because it's not intimidating.
It's an awesome bike, it's accessible to loads of people, you know, not so intimidating as the larger scramblers or adventure bikes. gaining massive popularity in the centre. I've ordered more for next year because how busy and popular they are. It's a fab bike, fab bit of kit.
There's different levels, isn't there, that you can do at the centre? Like, how far can you go on this versus a Tiger 900 or Tiger 12, or you've got the dirt bikes as well now?
Yes, we've got the new enduro bikes, and they're incredible here. Now we cover a huge amount of off-road skills, and this bike, within our training courses, you can use this on level 1, 2 and 3.
Right.
So like when you're here in the arena, we're able to control that. It's when you take that out on the natural trails that maybe it's more rugged because of the ground clearance. You just need to be mindful of that. So the bike is more than capable. It's how you tackle that terrain. So rather than pushing it on massive rocks and huge deep ruts, you might have to be a bit more line choicey.
Yeah.
But then it's easier than say somebody trying to do something that's more complicated and technical on a bigger, heavier bike. So it balances out. The thing is, it's not an enduro bike. It's not a 1200 Scrambler. That will take an absolute pasting. You're not, and it's not that bike. So, and it's not trying to be that bike. But what it is a comfortable, capable bike. That's set at the right price range and market for people. It's accessible, It's fabulous for around the town, through the country lanes, and then go either off-roading or green laning. Not many bikes are able to do all of that at that price range and have the quality that we're delivering,
How well that, sump guard, the engine bars and stuff like that would hold up if you did hammer this bike, I'm not quite sure, especially like I say, because it's not super tall. But yeah, for anyone looking to do anything more serious, it might be those sorts of things, the hand guards, all that sort of stuff that you look to reinforce by maybe finding something pretty serious on the aftermarket. But like I say, then when you get into that stage, are you better off going for something that's purpose-built, like a mid to small capacity adventure bike. Last time I was here, we did all this stuff and more on the Tiger 1200 Rallies or Rally Pros, bike that's way more built with off-roading in mind. But I've got to say, although maybe, the same trails aren't quite possible on this bike, in a way I feel like I'm having a little bit more fun. I don't feel as stressed out by the weight of the bike, by the height of it, by the power of it. And so I reckon there is something to be said for taking something a little less serious, as long as your expectations of what it can do are, realistic. Yeah, apparently this is a sit down and paddle through kind of job today because of the depth of it. So let's see how we go on. I didn't even get my boots wet, thankfully, my lovely boots. Triumph specifically said dress a little bit retro for this press launch, but I think that was when it was still dry about a week or two back. And in hindsight, it might have been wise to wear something a little more suited, let's say, to the frequency of puddles. Yes, little Scrambler. Sometimes a sudden impact isn't quite soaked up by the fork as nicely as you might hope. That's where you'll definitely notice a big difference versus an adventure bike. But if you're not, charging into obstacles, then it's not really a problem. Genuinely, I'm really gelling with this bike and getting a little bit more confident. And I've got to say, I'm just having such good fun. And I think it's because it just feels easy. There's not loads of, snap to the throttle, so it's hard to overcook it with the rear. There's not loads of bite to the front brake like those style lemmas on the Tiger 900s and Scrambler 1200s, so you don't have to be too finessed. Yeah, you can light up the rear, spin it up, and you just don't feel like it's a big machine to lug around and like it's going to go over on you. That though back there is probably the only bit that I'd say isn't particularly confidence inspiring, and that's the suspension. Like I said earlier, it's set up for road riding predominantly, and so it is Perhaps a little firm, a little short. So not only when you take a big hit does it not feel too cushy, you know, I'd like a little bit more of that, but also when you do go quick over those really bumpy bits, you can easily start getting a bit out of shape. But that said, you know, longer suspension makes for a taller bike, which is harder to get on with sometimes. And so like all things in bike design, and also considering that most of these bikes will predominantly be ridden on the road, it's just a trade-off, a balance that someone at Triumph's had to make. And when you think of it that way, perhaps they've got it about right. A road bike that doesn't mind getting a little bit dirty. Woo! And having a bit of fun.
So look, end of a great day of riding. Bikes being hosed down behind me, they did get a little bit dirty. But look, I've been invited here plenty of times over the past few years. Obviously, when they have a new off-road capable bike, they like to get people down here to try it out. And of course, today, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the time that I've been challenged the most or developed the most as a rider, because we weren't doing the most difficult stuff. But at the same time, I would say it's probably the most fun I've had and the most chilled experience I've had, because we weren't pushing that hard. So it just allowed you to play around with the bike, to get to grips with it and to have a good time. So would I say this is one for hardcore dirt bike enthusiasts? Realistically not, but if you've ever wanted a sort of gentle introduction to off-road riding, then definitely now the whole Triumph Adventure experience perhaps looks a lot less intimidating. Then if you're thinking of buying one because you want to do majority road riding, but if you're wondering whether it can potentially dabble in a bit of green laning and light off-road trails, well, I think you've got to say the answer is a resounding yes.
As always, do let us know what you think of the bike down in the comments below. And if you want to see my review of the cheaper, lighter X version, then I'll put that on the screen now. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.